behind the closed doors and also sometimes not being outspoken. And do you plan to do things differently in your second term? Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, it is clear that we have in Afghanistan a serious situation of violations of human rights, and it is clear that our objectives in relation, namely to the rights of women and children, the possibility, women and girls, the possibility of all women to work, the possibility of all girls to have access to secondary school and higher grade this is not yet met. There had been some progress. For instance, the UN female staff members are authorized to work. And we know some situations where young girls have access to school, but clearly these are localized examples. There are a few entities of the government where women also are authorized to work, but again, they are very few. And we have been in constant advocacy with the Taliban to say that it is absolutely essential for them in the context of their objective of recognition, but also in the context of their objective of getting international support for their own people. It is absolutely essential to have full respect for the rights of women and girls and to have a positive approach to human rights in general. So this is something we have been telling clearly, publicly, and in our discussions with them. But I would like to make a note on this. Humanitarian aid and the need to avoid a collapse in Afghanistan is something, economic collapse in Afghanistan, is something that we have been fighting for because the people of Afghanistan is in an absolute desperate situation. And it would be a mistake to submit the people of Afghanistan to a collective punishment just because the de facto authorities are not behaving properly. So I would like to separate the two things. We will go on with our humanitarian action. We will go on insisting on the need to have liquidity allowing for the economy not to collapse, for the people not to be in an absolute desperate situation. And you just gave a few examples of how desperate people are. At the same time, we'll go on insisting with the Taliban on human rights, but also on the question of terrorism and on the question of inclusive governance. Now, I never said that I only do private diplomacy, and I sometimes say some very tough things. If you read my speech today, there are some very tough things about the situation in the world in different aspects. Now, that doesn't mean that I always say the things you would like me to say, but that's life. I will intend to go on doing discreet diplomacy, doing active public diplomacy, and speaking out when I believe this is the best way to solve the problems we face, be it in human rights, be it in economic and financial situation, be it in climate, be it in vaccines or in whatever other area.
Thank you. We'll go to the screen. Michelle Nichols, Reuters.
Thank you, Secretary General. My question is also on Afghanistan. Last week, you made that strong appeal on Afghanistan that included asking for the conditional release of frozen funds and for international funding to be used to pay public sector workers. The United States plays a key role in whether these things can happen, and Martin Griffiths last week met with the Secretary of State. What has the US committed to do to help, and is it enough?
Well, both Martin Griffith and Peter Maurer were in Washington. I think the dialogue was important and constructive, and I hope it will produce results in the short term.
Thank you. Ibtisam Azam.
Hi, my name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I have a short follow-up first on Yemen. And you asked or you called for ceasefire and a stop of hostilities. Do you believe that countries, especially countries, Western countries like France, the US, the UK, who deliver weapons to parties to the conflict should also stop delivering such weapons, especially to countries who are involved in war, and put more pressure on the different parties. And my question is on Tunisia and the situation there, and the fact that we have an elected president who grabbed more power, and there is more restrictions of freedom, there is more restrictions for the civil society. What's your message there? And do you think that the UN or the African Union should be maybe mediate or involved? Thank you.
Well, I think first of all, I would say it's good not to specify just one group of countries when there are others that are doing the same. And I would strongly encourage everybody to adopt a policy putting pressure for a peaceful solution and not enlarging the military capacity of the parties to the conflict. The second situation we follow with concern. We believe that Tunisia's democratic revolution was something that inspired hope all over the world, and we surely want that democratic revolution to be preserved in all democratic values. And we hope that this will happen, and we see your concern and we see the concerns, and I hope that those concerns will be removed by the full restoration of an institutional democratic framework that works for all Tunisians.
Talal Al-Haj. Talal.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Secretary General. I have a small follow-up on Yemen concerning the Houthis, who the Security Council today described their attacks as terroristic and heinous. What are you going to do to convince the Houthis to sit on the table, or at least to speak to the special envoy, who they are refusing to receive in Sana'a and talk to him? Because without being engaged to both parties, it's not enough to be engaged with the coalition and the Yemeni government. Without that, Mr. Hans Grunberg's hands are tied. Are you doing something to make sure that the Houthis will sit on the table, will talk to Hans Grunberg? And on Libya, do you believe that the elections will be held before June? And I mean the elections, the parliamentary and the presidential. And do you prefer to separate these two or keep them together in the same election? Thank you.
Well, first of all, in relation to Yemen, it is a big mistake for the Houthis not to receive our special envoy. And indeed, we have been in close contact with the different countries that keep a relationship with the Houthis to try to explain to them that it is in their interest and in the interest of peace that our special envoy is able to go to Sana'a. And I hope that this will take place soon. Sorry, the second question was?
On Libya.
Libya. In relation to Libya, my special advisor, Stephanie Williams, is making all contacts and all forms of mediation, hoping to create the conditions for, indeed, elections to take place, and to take place in the first semester of this year. And I think that is very important for the Libyan people. Now, the choice of how the elections will be, what is first, what is second, is a choice for the Libyan people. What was foreseen, as you remember, in our past positions and the resolutions, was that the elections, both for Parliament and for the presidency, will be together before the end of last year. And so that was the position that was assumed in the resolutions of the Security Council.
Thank you. Alan Bulkati, Interfax.
Thanks so much. RIA Novosti, Stefan, may I correct you? Yeah. Mr. Secretary General, thank you for the briefing. We're all witnessing the huge tensions between Russia and the US, Russia and NATO at current situation. Some experts and some politicians even mentioned that we're at the age of at the age of nuclear war. May I ask you if you find reasonable the demands of Russian Federation, I mean the demands of security guarantees which Russia demands from US and NATO. Do you think that these guarantees might somehow help avoid the full-scale confrontation? And how can you assess today's negotiations between Foreign Minister Lavrov and Antony Blinken, Foreign Secretary of State Foreign Blinken in Secretary of State Blinken in Geneva? Thank you.
It is not for me to comment on the details of the positions of the parties in this dialogue that is taking place. What for me is essential is that this dialogue leads to a good solution, and that good solution is that there is de-escalation and that this crisis ends. That is our objective. I've been saying that I strongly hope that diplomacy will prevail.
Thank you. Margaret Bashir, Voice of America.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Secretary General. Following up on Russia-Ukraine, I know you said you're hopeful that this will not escalate into a Russian invasion. However, you have a lot of UN staff in Ukraine, particularly Eastern Ukraine. What contingency planning is the United Nations doing to protect their staff? And do you have any plans, if there's an invasion, to pull them out, to scale down your presence in Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, first of all, our objective, our main objective is that no contingency plan would have to be ever applied, and that is our main objective. Of course, in all circumstances in the world where there are risks, we adopt a certain number of measures of protection. This is being done in many parts of the world. At the present moment, I insist, what we must all contribute to is to avoid a confrontation that would be extremely negative for everybody, and to create the conditions for a diplomatic solution of the problem.
Thank you. Mr. Xu from China Central Television.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please. If you could, go ahead.
Secretary General, the question is, today during your speech, you mentioned that to put humanity at the center of technology. Meanwhile, it's been several years that the United States actually waging a technology war against China. According to some of the media, they describe it as it is. And they limit the export of semiconductor to China, which China has to make products to export to the world. Do you think this kind of measures or ask other countries to exclude Chinese companies to construct its cellular network would be hampering your efforts to ensure affordable, safe, and security internet service for all, and to close the digital divide to promote a global digital cooperation? Or even to hamper the efforts to revive from the pandemic of the world economy? Thank you.
Well, I've been many times saying that we need to avoid at all costs the division of the world into two, with each with its own economic system and set of rules, each with its own currency, each with dominant currency, each with its own internet, and each with its own technological strategy in artificial intelligence and in other aspects. So we need to have a unified, I always advocated for the need for a unified global market, a unified global economy. Now, it is clear that at the present moment there are a number of differences, and I've been advocating, both with the US and with China, on the importance of a serious dialogue and a serious negotiation on the aspects of trade and technology, in which the two countries have, at the present moment, different positions, to have a serious negotiation, to be able to overcome those difficulties, and to be able to establish that global market in which all can cooperate and all can benefit.
Thank you. Pam Falk, CBS News. Pam. Pam?
You can hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Thank you for the briefing, Secretary General.
On the camera, Pam, please.
Yeah, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'd like to follow up on the Ukraine question. On it, can the United Nations do anything to mediate the dispute? And have you or any of the UN officials been part of a negotiation or discussion about your interest in a dialogue? And on that front, do you see any difference between an incursion and an invasion? Thank you.
Well, first of all, there is a format in which mediation takes place in the context that we are talking about. That format is based on the Minsk Agreement and the so-called Normandy 4. And it was always very clear from the members of the Normandy 4, Germany, France, Russia, and Ukraine, that this was not a negotiation within a UN framework. So the UN is not, there is no resolution supporting that, and there has never been an acceptance by the parties to have the UN as a formal mediator in this situation. One thing I can guarantee is that my good offices are permanently available and are permanently available to ease the reduction of tensions. And on the other hand, I can guarantee that I'm not going to enter into any question of semantics. I simply believe that we need to avoid the worst, whatever the name that you call it, and I simply believe that we have to find a diplomatic solution to make sure that whatever the name you give to it doesn't happen.
Thank you. Iftikhar Ali, Associated Press of Pakistan.
Thank you, Steph. Mr. Secretary General, wishing you, thank you, Steph. Mr. Secretary General, wishing you a successful second term. In your speech today, you outlined your priorities to begin your new term, referring to some new and old conflicts, divisions, and misinformation among your key priorities. Sir, on 8th of August 2019, you made a comprehensive statement on the Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan, saying that UN position on this decades-old dispute was based on the UN Charter, Security Council resolution, and bilateral agreements between the two countries. Do you think, sir, that Jammu and Kashmir dispute continues to pose threat to international peace and security? I thank you, sir.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
The question is about the dispute in Kashmir.
No, I know, but can you repeat your last phrase? I couldn't hear your last phrase because the sound is not good. Do I?
Do you think, sir, that Jammu and Kashmir dispute continues to pose threat to international peace and security?
Well, the position of the UN and the resolutions that were taken are the same, remain the same. We have, as you know, a peacekeeping operation there. We are, of course, committed. I've offered my good offices several times, and we hope that this is something that can be solved peacefully, and that the situation in Kashmir is a situation in which human rights are respected and in which people can live in peace and security.
Thank you. Ray?
Thank you, Secretary General. Ray Bouchafra from Sky News Arabiya. Today's Security Council statement condemns the Houthi militias as well as their financiers and their sponsors. It's not secret that Iran is one of the biggest sponsor and financer of the Houthi militia. What do you think about this fact on the Security Council statement? Also, same topic, just like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, Houthis, they are targeting civilians, whether inside Yemen or outside Yemen. Do you agree with those voices who are asking to put Houthis on the terrorist list? And even the US new administration is considering that, according to President Biden. Thank you.
Well, the designation of a terrorist organization in the UN is done by the Security Council, so it's not by me. What I want to reaffirm is that I consider that the attack that was made to the United Arab Emirates is totally unacceptable. It's a form of escalation that is absolutely regrettable, and that on top of that was a big mistake, because what we need is to move towards solution of the problem and not towards escalation of the problem.
Thank you. Carrie Newton.
Merci Steph. Bonjour Monsieur le Secrétaire Général, je vous souhaite un second terme plein de résultats. En parlant les pays africains au début de votre premier mandat avaient demandé plus de solutions africaines aux problèmes africains, et Dieu sait qu'il y a des problèmes africains traités à l'ONU. Comment évaluez-vous les progrès effectués dans ce domaine, et du coup, que pensez sur le dossier malien de la division du Conseil il y a 10 jours? Est-ce que c'est décevant, le fait que la communauté internationale n'ait pas... que le Conseil de sécurité soit divisé sur le fait des Nations Unies, il y a 10 jours, ne soit pas unis sur le fait qu'il faille suivre les sanctions de la CEDEAO?
Nous continuons à considérer que le leadership de la solution des problèmes africains doit être africain. Et je suis fier du fait que les Nations Unies appuient l'Union africaine et appuient les différentes organisations régionales, notamment la CEDEAO, dans la solution de conflits africains. La CEDEAO a décidé un certain nombre de sanctions. Le Conseil de sécurité s'est divisé. Alors, il n'y a pas une position du Conseil de sécurité à ce sujet, mais ça ne nous empêche pas de coopérer avec la CEDEAO pour la solution du problème. J'ai moi-même été en contact 2 fois dans les 3 derniers jours, 2 fois avec le président du Ghana et aussi avec le président du Nigeria, le président du Sénégal, 2 fois avec le président de la Commission de l'Union africaine. Et j'ai moi-même fait un coup de téléphone au colonel Goïta. Alors, je crois que c'est notre devoir, en tant que secrétariat des Nations Unies, de tout faire pour coopérer avec les institutions africaines pour la solution du problème. C'est dommage que nous n'ayons pas une décision formelle du Conseil de sécurité. Ça, naturellement, pourrait élargir la nature de notre mandat.
Merci. We'll go to Benny Avni, please. Benny.
Hello.
Benny, can you turn on your camera, Benny?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
My question is a little, from 500 miles up. Are we on the verge of Cold War II?
Sorry, are we on the verge of?
Cold War II.
Cold War II?
Not on the verge, but we are witnessing a new form. I wouldn't call Cold War, I wouldn't call hot war, I would call probably a new form of tepid confrontation, which is not similar to the World War II, because the World War II, the Cold War, had a certain number of rules. It was between two blocks. Those two blocks were structured. They had each one its military alliance. There were clear rules and clear mechanisms of prevention of conflict. And the Cold War, to a certain extent, the truces never became hot because there was a certain level of predictability in the way that Cold War existed. What we have now is much more chaotic, much less predictable. We have no instruments to deal with crises. So this is, indeed, we live in a dangerous situation. And I hope when we look into the crises of which everybody talks, I hope that they lead to forms of confrontation that would be a disaster for us all.
Thank you. Lenka White, Mainichi Japanese newspaper. Lenka?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Tomorrow is 1 year anniversary of TPNW. In your opinion, what impact has had TPNW since entering into force? And second, how NPT and TPNW can complement each other when we have confrontations among the nuclear states ahead of the first meeting of TPNW in March? Thank you.
Well, this is a matter in which it is absolutely necessary to move in two directions in simultaneous. One action is non-proliferation, the other action is disarmament. By the way, that is how things were perceived, that they are two faces of the same coin. Non-proliferation is something in which we guarantee that no new states acquire nuclear weapons. The compensation for that is the states that have nuclear weapons to be ready to reduce their arsenals. And my hope is that this principle can be reestablished again. We are unfortunately seeing an increase of nuclear warheads. We have now 13,000 nuclear warheads in the world, and I don't think this is something that we can accept.
Thank you. Abdelhamid, go ahead. Okay, well, in the meantime, we'll go to Mario Villar, FA. Mario.
Secretario General, una pregunta en español, si me permite, sobre el Sáhara Occidental. Con la visita del señor de Mistura a la región, ¿ve posibilidades de desbloqueo del conflicto y cuál sería su mensaje para las partes y para los países que tienen influencia en esta cuestión?
La pregunta es que yo no comprendí porque el sonido no es muy claro. La pregunta específica es ¿cuál es mi mensaje?
Te preguntaba sobre el Sáhara Occidental con la visita del señor de Mistura a la región, si ve posibilidades de desbloquear el conflicto y cuál es su mensaje para las partes y para los países que tienen influencia.
En primer lugar, Stefan de Mistura ha hecho su primera visita a la región. Tengo la esperanza que el proceso político se desarrolle de nuevo. Y mi mensaje a las partes es que un problema que dura a tantas décadas en una área del mundo donde asistimos a problemas de seguridad extremadamente graves, donde vemos el terrorismo multiplicarse en el Sahel y cada vez más junto de la costa, es en el interés de todos solucionar de una vez por todas este problema del Sáhara Occidental. Entonces, mi mensaje es este tiempo de que las partes comprendan la necesidad de un diálogo procurando una solución y no solamente mantener un proceso interminable sin una esperanza de resolución. Creo que la situación de la región recomienda hoy un interés más fuerte de las dos partes para solucionar el problema.
Thank you. James Reinhold, The National. James.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Hello, Secretary General. Another question on Yemen. After the attacks in Abu Dhabi, US President Biden said he was considering redesignating the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization. This issue came up before, about a year ago. Back then, the UN campaigned hard against the US taking such a step, saying it would prevent aid agencies from operating in northern Yemen. But what do you say about this issue now?
Well, first of all, in the UN, it's the Security Council that designates a terrorist organization. The problem that exists in situations like Yemen, if one party designates it as a terrorist organization, is that that is accompanied by a number of sanctions. Now, the truth is that our experience reveals that those sanctions can create difficulties in relation to not only humanitarian aid, but also to the solution of some of the most dramatic problems, hunger, health that exist in the country. So I think our position is the same in the sense that we need to make sure that no decisions are made without being carefully measured the possibilities of those decisions not to impact negatively on humanitarian aid.
Thank you. Joe Klein, Canada Free Press. Joe?
Yes, thank you. Sir, I want to return to your speech today, in particular the technology portion of your speech, where you talked about digital chaos and you criticized the business models of social media companies profiting from algorithms that prioritize, in your words, addiction, outrage, and outrage. My question is, are you equally concerned with the use of these platforms for state surveillance of what appears on social media, and also the power of a few huge social media platforms to censor free speech on a grand scale worldwide? Thank you.
Well, if you read my speech, in my speech I spoke of manipulation and control. Manipulation is related to private social platforms. Control is related to states using the same methodology to, as if you read the rest of the sentence, to control our own or to influence our own behavior. So what I said applies to both situations. Indeed, I do believe that there is a serious question with the business model. I mean, the business model is made in a way in which profits increase with advertising, and advertising, of course, produces more resources. The more contacts are made, the more times the operation, the more people are engaged. And the experience reveals that this system is a system that tends to work in a much stronger way, with kind of provocative, xenophobic, controversial things than with, I would say, reasonable statements about positive things that can happen in the world. So is this business model that needs to be reviewed in order not to have an automatic effect, which is the fact that the negative dimensions are spreading much more quickly than the positive dimensions, because this is clearly linked to the way in which profits increase more clearly. So a serious discussion about business models is, in my opinion, absolutely essential. And of course, this means that states should not be using artificial intelligence to have a mechanism of full control of their own citizens.
Thank you. Evelyn Leopold. Evelyn? Evelyn?
Okay. Secretary General, Happy New Year, and thank you for the briefing. On human rights, I realize there's difficulty in different countries defining
Evelyn.
Do you intend to pull out governments that permit neighbor visits, including perhaps those large countries and permanent members of this?
Well, I'm terribly sorry, I couldn't understand.
I think the
word.
question is, why do you not call out certain governments for violations, including some of the most powerful ones?
Well, as a matter of fact, I've done it several times, and I will do it when I consider this is the best way to deal with the problem.
Thank you. Jimmy Quinn. Jimmy?
Hi there. Thanks for doing this, Secretary General. So my question is about the Olympics. You're headed there in a couple of weeks, and a number of human rights groups and independent experts have found that the Chinese government is currently carrying out crimes against humanity and genocide against ethnic minorities in the Xinjiang region. So I know you're headed to the Games in a non-political capacity, but one, do you intend to raise the issue with the Chinese government while you're there? And two, is it your assessment that the government is carrying out crimes against humanity currently? Thank you.
Let's be clear. This visit to the Olympics is not a political visit. It has not any link to any. Sorry?
No, please. If everybody else could keep their microphones off. Go ahead, sir.
So this visit is a visit that comes out of an invitation by the International Olympic Committee and corresponds to what has been a very solid partnership between the UN and the International Olympic Committee. We consider that the Olympic Games are an extremely important manifestation in today's world of the possibility of unity, of the possibility of mutual respect, of the possibility of cooperation, of peoples, of different cultures, of different religions, of different ethnicities. And this is more important than ever when we see xenophobia, when we see racism, when we see white supremacy, when we see anti-Semitism, when we see anti-Muslim hatred proliferating all over the world. I think the Olympic ideal is something that we have to cherish. And that is the reason why I'm going to the Olympic Games. And it has nothing to do with my opinions about the different policies that take place in the People's Republic of China.
Okay, one last question. Oscar, please go ahead, and that'll be it. Oscar? Oscar Bolanos? Okay, sir, I think you're then off the hook. Thank you very much.
All the best.